Hey guys, welcome back to more homeowner association stories. Imagine buying your dream home, no HOA, total freedom, only to be stalked, fined and threatened over backyard barbecues. And then these entitled HOA Karens cross the line, so I hit back in a way they will never forget. Let's dive right into the story. And the HOA Karen titled story is titled HOA banned my barbecue parties unaware I own their community park. About a year ago, I moved into what I thought was going to be my peaceful forever home. I had just gotten a great new job, and after years of apartment hopping, I was ready for some stability and to settle down. I toured dozens of houses, but one stood out. Not because it was the biggest or most modern, but because it had a beautiful spacious backyard perfect for weekend barbecues and summer hangouts. Most importantly, it was not under the jurisdiction of the local HOA, an absolute must for me. Now, if you've ever dealt with an HOA, you already know why that was a major selling point. But in this case, I didn't just take the realtor's word for it, as I've heard of others getting screwed from that. I made sure it was in writing, and I even confirmed it with the previous owner, a guy named Rick, that I swear is the coolest dude I've ever met. Rick practically begged me to never ever sign anything the HOA gave me. He explained that for 3 years straight, the HOA had been badgering him to join voluntarily. They had tried everything from friendly invites, neighborhood newsletters, door-to-door visits, even holiday cookies once. He never caved. And by the way guys, not sure if I could resist those cookies. I might agree to a deal with the devil when it comes to cookies. Anyway, in fact he told me they seemed to get increasingly bitter about it towards the end. Rick made me promise that I'd never let them sink their claws into the property. He seemed to know something that I didn't, so I moved in hopeful after what he said. At first, the neighborhood seemed pretty generic. People waved, introduced themselves, and I did meet the HOA board members. They gave me the usual opening line of me loving it here and that I would love the community park, using that to try and get me to join. I was polite but firm when I declined when they asked to send me HOA paperwork. That was the exact moment the smiles started to crack. Suddenly, the friendly board members started making weird remarks to each other loudly when I was nearby about how unified neighborhoods function better and how everyone should really do their part. They began showing up more often to tell me about events that I was missing out on, making the point that it was going to get warmer soon and that since I was not a member, I had no right to use the community park. I don't think they were counting on me saying that I wasn't planning to go there anyway. The park itself was like everything else, generic: benches, a playground, some grills and a few picnic tables. Nothing that interested me, since if I wanted to have a party, I had my own backyard. I would catch HOA board members walking past my property a little too slowly, as if they were inspecting it. One time, I got a letter saying that my trash cans had been out too long, even though I was not even in the HOA. I wrote "not a member" in big red Sharpie and left it taped to my cans just to show that I was a bit petty. They took that down within a year. For a half a year, they just would not let up. The passive-aggressive behavior turned into outright bullying. I got 3 friendly reminders from the HOA about how great their rules were for community order. When that didn't work, they sent someone to talk to me that kept talking about how being in the HOA was good liability coverage in case something happened. The undertone of the threat was so obvious, it was basically an overtone. I did everything I could to ignore them. They couldn't legally fine me, they could not even touch my house legally, so they could only really talk, making it clear to me that I was not welcome to their community park or to go to their events. I was not antisocial, I just didn't care. But then summer came, and with it the perfect barbecue weather, and for a lover of barbecuing like me, it was a big deal. I even bought a smoker, since that bad boy could fit in the backyard easily. That is when things also really started to explode. The weather turned perfect, clear skies, 80s during the day, light breezes at night. My backyard was practically begging to be used, and hey, I bought this house specifically because of the private backyard. So I did what any sane, grill-loving human would do. I invited some friends and family over for a little barbecue, the first of many I planned. Nothing crazy, just good food, cold drinks, a Bluetooth speaker, playing some chill music. I think jazz goes with a barbecue vibe, screw the haters, and lawn chairs scattered across the grass. I even made sure the music was not too loud because I still respect my neighbors. It was just people enjoying ribs and potato salad. In fact, my immediate neighbors, who also were not in the HOA, came by and thanked me for the invite. It was the kind of evening that reminded me why I bought the house in the first place, but of course the HOA noticed. I should have known that the scent of grilling meat was like a mating call for busybodies. I can only imagine the horror if the HOA were vegans or something. The day after my first barbecue, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, but clearly from the HOA, as they prided themselves on seeming important with a custom stamp. We have received complaints regarding unauthorized gatherings at your residence. Please note that all barbecues must be registered with the HOA and take place in the designated community park area to maintain the neighborhood harmony. Continued violations may result in action. I could not stop laughing at it. Action from who? I'm not in your little HOA cult. I then tossed the letter in the trash and hosted another barbecue 2 weeks later. This one was a birthday party for my cousin and even more relaxed. We had balloons, played cornhole, and had some cupcakes. About halfway through the afternoon, a few unfamiliar faces showed up on the sidewalk outside my yard. I recognized one of them as the HOA president. Let's call her Marcia, because I feel like that's a fun name to shout insults to. Or say 3 times in a row. That comment probably really aged me. At first, they just stood there as if they wanted to audition for the role of lawn ornament. Then it escalated by like 10 steps. They called the police on me. 2 squad cars showed up to this total non-emergency. An officer walked into my backyard and very politely asked me what was going on. I explained, showed him my driver's license to prove that I lived there, and asked if there had been a noise complaint. Officer, we were told there was an unauthorized event going on here that was not cleared with your HOA. Me, did I need authorization by the county? I'm not even part of the HOA. Officer, well, I can see that there aren't any laws being broken. Sorry for disrupting your party. And just like that, the police left. Marcia and her cronies stood outside fuming. That night, I got another letter. This one was even angrier and funnier. Unofficial barbecues are banned in this neighborhood. You must reserve the community park for all gatherings. Continued disregard will lead to enforcement. Unofficial barbecues, very important legal term I'm sure, at least in the fantasy world they live in. I'm not part of the HOA, I have no obligation to reserve their park or obey their rules. I would have written them back if they bothered to give a return address. And yeah guys, by the way, if you lived in an HOA or next to one but you're not part of one, would you listen to the letters they sent you? To all the harassment and bullying, how would you react? Let me know in the comments. Over the next month, every single time I hosted a backyard event, small or large, literally one was just 3 people, the HOA either showed up to glare at me from the street, sent a threatening letter, or called the cops on me. The officers got to know me pretty well and even started joking about it. I wanted to grill as often as possible now just to piss the HOA off. I started saving everything, the letters, the voicemails, even doorbell camera footage of HOA members standing across the street with their arms crossed. The cherry on top was when I got a notice claiming I owed a non-member compliance fine of $200 for causing disruption to the neighborhood. Just pausing for a second, what the hell is a non-member compliance fine? Isn't the whole thing of being a non-member that you cannot be fined? Does Marcia even know what words are? If they wanted a war over barbecues, fine, but I was not just going to keep swatting their nonsense away, I was going to hit back and hit hard. They had no clue who they were dealing with. Mess with a man, you might get away with it. Mess with a man who spent 16 hours smoking a brisket, and you're going to have a big problem. And yeah guys, I for sure wouldn't want to mess with Mark Zuckerberg when he was smoking his brisket in his backyard. Does anyone remember that livestream/video? That had to be one of the most bizarre videos I've ever seen in my life. Either way, let me know in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, after the 4th time the police were called on one of my backyard barbecues and once again did absolutely nothing because I wasn't breaking any laws, I decided it was time to confront these clowns directly. I was tired of being harassed in my own home by an HOA I was not even a part of, so I gathered up every letter they had sent, printed out the fine invoice for that absurd non-member compliance, and even requested copies of the police reports tied to my address. I wanted to have those receipts. Then I showed up to their next HOA meeting. I had no right to vote or participate in their official business, but the meeting was held in the community park under a pavilion, technically on public land. So I walked up binder in hand with the confidence of a man who had reached his limit. The board members looked shocked to see me. Some of the regular attendees just kind of stared at me, giving awkward smiles. But Marcia, the queen bee president, gave me a look that I just dragged mud across her white carpet. I knew that I had to speak before she did, and once her mouth opened, it probably would not close anytime soon. So I opened my mouth and the binder. Me, I'm not here to join. I'm just here to make something crystal clear. You've been harassing me with these for the past 6 months. I'm not a member of your HOA. My property is not under your jurisdiction. I owe you nothing, and any future threats, fines, or attempts to enforce your rules on me will be considered harassment. Marcia, we have not been harassing you. Me, I'm not even done here. You have called the police on me several times, and each time they leave, they state that I have broken no law. You want to act like a government instead of a glorified gossip circle. That's fine, just leave me out of it, or the next letter will be sent to my lawyer and a lawsuit will be filed. Marcia, you don't even need to be a member, but you're disrupting our activities. People can smell smoke and your noise keeps people awake. You cannot just use community resources for free. If you just signed documents to join, then you can use the park like everyone else. Me, the only resource I'm using is my own backyard. As for joining this little cult, I can promise that'll never happen. I turned to leave, but I guessed that Marcia could not let somebody else be the last one to get a word out. Marcia, if you continue these antics, then we will have no choice but to consider a lien on your home until you comply. That was it for me. I was not gonna stand around and argue with her over anything. Me, I promise that you're gonna regret that last sentence. At this point, some of the other attendees were visibly uncomfortable. A few even looked amused. I walked away with a mental to-do list growing by the second, threatening a lien on a non-member's property, harassment letters, fines with no legal backing. It was time to stop playing defense and take the fight to them. If they wanted a fight, they would get one that they would never forget. I had no idea yet how I would hit them where it hurt, but I had a strong suspicion that their precious little park was gonna be the key. I left that meeting pissed off but oddly energized, because now it was not just about barbecues, it was about standing up to power-tripping bullies who thought they could steamroll whoever they wanted. They had threatened me with everything short of witchcraft and had the nerve to talk about liens on a house not even under their jurisdiction. But despite how good it felt to publicly dunk on them, I was still on edge. These people were not just annoying, they were obsessed, and obsessed people cannot be reasoned with. So I did what anyone should do when the neighborhood queen bee starts acting crazy, which is I called a lawyer. So I met with a local real estate attorney and laid everything on the table. The letters, the so-called fines, the threats, and the absolutely insane idea of putting a lien on my house. After about 10 minutes of reviewing the paperwork, the lawyer gave me a half smile and said that I was legally fine and they could not enforce anything, but that did not mean that they wouldn't stop trying. And she was right. I was not worried about losing in court now if it came to that, but I was worried about constant harassment. I was worried about property damage. Even if I got cameras, it would not negate things they did. Plus, people can be sneaky. She suggested I could sue them for harassment or intentional infliction of emotional distress. There was definitely a case and I documented everything beautifully. It was a tempting idea that I decided to put on hold though. I did not want to just beat them. I wanted revenge. And that is when I had a moment of divine inspiration. So it started small, a random conversation with one of my neighbors who let slip that the HOA did not even own their community park. He was complaining about the dues being so high, but them being cheap and not buying the land. Instead, they opted to keep paying to rent it. After some public record searching and a few calls, I found the truth. The HOA had been renting the land from a small development company for years under a month-to-month lease. It was not even a long-term contract, they paid a modest monthly fee and that was it. They did not even have an agreement that gave them the right to keep renting. I couldn't believe it. So I tracked down the developer, a man named David who was more than happy to talk business. We grabbed coffee and I asked point blank if he was interested in selling the land outright instead of continuing to lease it to the HOA. He was eager and had zero hesitation. It turns out he'd been offering to sell it instead of renting for years with them, either lowballing or not being interested. He'd be happy to sell if the price was right. That was music to my ears and I did the math. Between some savings, investments and a little creative financing, I could swing it. It wouldn't be easy, but I was fueled by spite at this point. We came to a deal and since it was halfway through the month, I had to let the HOA have it for the month they paid for. He would notify them that their lease was not going to be renewed and the property was sold. If they wanted to find out who bought it, they would need to check the county records. And what made it perfect was that the summer was just around the corner and the HOA had a full calendar of community events lined up, 4th of July fireworks, movie nights, family field days, etc. Events that they love to brag about. I didn't tell even my trusted neighbors about this either. I wanted it to be a real shock. The day the HOA's lease on the park expired, I wasted no time. Before the sun had fully risen, I was out there with a locksmith changing every lock on the park's gates. Not a single old key was gonna work to get into that park. Then I posted a large sign. Private property, no trespassing. A smaller paper posted to every entrance explained that this land is no longer affiliated with the HOA and any access would be considered trespassing. A smaller paper posted to every entrance explained that his land is no longer affiliated with the HOA and any access would be considered trespassing. That the land had been sold and without the written permission of the new owner, no access would be allowed. I wanted to make sure the entire neighborhood knew that the park was now closed. I also did not sign my name just to make them sweat a bit more. From my porch, I watched chaos unfold in real time. First came the morning walkers with their dogs or going for a job. One lady wearing a matching tracksuit and clutching a Starbucks walked right up to the sign, squinted and gasped. She then tried the gate. That didn't work. I don't know why she didn't read the sign. Then she stood there, arms folded, like sheer suburban rage would open it by force. Or again, maybe the HOA was planning some play where everybody was statues or lawn ornaments. Within hours, the HOA group chat must have exploded because people were rolling up in SUVs and minivans, parking crookedly and storming over to the park gates like Bigfoot had shown up. Some read the sign and just stared in disbelief. Others got angry and started taking photos and talking over each other about the possibilities. The best part though? The HOA itself had not said a word yet. They clearly had not told anyone that the lease was not renewed, and based on the confused yelling I overheard, they did not expect to lose it either. Marcia was nowhere to be found now, and by late afternoon the HOA board and Marcia finally decided to show up. With them was a man with a clipboard and a suit that I assume was their legal counsel. They spoke to people and assured them this would be fixed. Then her suit friend whispered to her and she walked up to my door, knocking on it. Me, can I help you? Marcia, don't give me that smirk. I know that you did this. You had no right to lock the gates and put up those signs. This is our community park. Me, actually it isn't anymore. I have a folder right here and in it are copies of the deed and all my other paperwork. You can keep it if you want, frame it in your living room, I don't really care. The bottom line is I own the property now and the HOA is banned. Marcia, I don't care who legally owns it. The community needs it and we have plans set up. Me, too bad, so sad. Maybe if you didn't try and harass me and put a lien on my house, I would have minded my own business. But since you thought the HOA and my business had to intersect, I decided to do it on my own terms now. Try and enter the property and your little lawyer friend can tell you exactly what will happen. She left fuming and I stood in my yard sipping lemonade like a man who just won the neighborhood petty war. Watching as people finally started to file out and whisper how they couldn't believe that Marcia would let this happen. Over the next few days, things went nuclear. People started bombarding the HOA with complaints. Their entire summer event schedule was ruined, the park they had used as the HOA's crown jewel was now off limits, word got out quickly and the backlash was delicious. They were handing out newsletters and sending out emails saying that events were on hold until further notice. It turns out the park was the only thing many residents actually liked about the HOA. Without it, they began questioning what they were paying for. I of course was questioned by people about how I was able to get the land. I was able to tell them that the HOA never bought it and allowed their lease to get sold. Pinning it on them as really it should be considered their own fault. If I didn't buy it, somebody else could have easily done it and turned it into a supermarket or something. The HOA had completely misjudged their hand and the neighborhood noticed. The board's carefully polished facade began to crack and they held an emergency meeting, which turned into a shouting match. Residents showed up in droves demanding accountability. The board's explanations ranged from blaming the developer to blaming me to blaming the residents for not being more involved, and that last one really ticked people off. Someone even asked them if I had the sense to buy the land then, and why didn't they when they had the chance, or try and outbid me for it or really do anything aside from just sitting there and looking stupid. Marcia again stated that it was my fault and even if I owned the land, it should still be available for HOA use. Telling them her lawyers were looking into things like squatters' rights and other crap. And by the way guys, do you think the HOA has any reason to argue for squatters' rights here? I don't think that would make any sense, but then again you can never be sure with these HOAs. Sometimes they are really good at finding loopholes. Anyway, nobody bought anything that she was trying to sell them though, and I watched as people left the meeting steaming mad. At that point, a few neighbors started rallying to my side. They had seen how the HOA treated me, and now they understood that all their dues had been funneled into maintaining power and control, not into securing community assets. It was nice to have some people on my side, so it didn't look like I hated the entire neighborhood. They were willing to hear my side of the story and totally got that I had to do something because of the harassment. Bummed, but I did tell them that I wasn't planning on keeping the place just padlocked and to myself forever, hinting that if the HOA was gone, I might be more comfortable having it be in use. A petition began circulating, one to dissolve the HOA entirely. I don't want to take credit for it, but either my actions or words probably caused it to start. In the background, I kept things quiet. I was not trying to play savior or leader here, but I did begin softly reopening the park. People still had to get permission from me first, but if people wanted to use it, I was usually fair about it. I get that kids liked using the playground and it was a safe place to jog. A family wanted to have a picnic. As long as they cleaned up after themselves, I was all for it. The HOA supporters, though, were not getting in as I couldn't trust them. Friendly neighbors who had always been decent to me, I let them use the place, but no HOA-sanctioned events. No clipboard-wielding Karens enforcing nonsense rules. That era was done. And it actually became a little bit ironic. Now that the park was unofficial, people actually respected it more. People were saying it was cleaner than ever before and were not being rough on the equipment like the grills. When it was the HOA's problem, nobody cared if a table broke, but now they seem to care. The park was now kind of a symbolic reminder that power can only last as long as people are willing to tolerate it. Their control was gone, my fence was up, and the summer had just begun. That's not the end of the story though, as the HOA still was dealing with basically an angry mob and a petition to try and get them out of power completely. In the weeks after the park fiasco, the HOA began to unravel like a cheap sweater that got ran through the wash one too many times. Residents were furious, and rightly so. They felt betrayed not just because the park was gone, but because they finally saw how little power the HOA really had. And how recklessly they had wielded it. For years they'd been paying dues for promises that were never secured. When they found out that the board had rejected the developer's offers to buy the land multiple times, the outrage turned into revolt. The first thing they were asking for was back dues, as they didn't want to pay for this year because there was no park anymore, claiming it was the only cost the HOA had and without it there should be no need for all of that money they were paying. And if they didn't use it to rent the park, it should still be sitting there waiting to get back into people's pockets. The HOA was refusing to do this though, and my guess was that they didn't have enough money to give a year's dues back to people. Marcia claimed money had already been spent on the events that could no longer happen. The petition to dissolve dissolve the HOA did not take long to gain traction. People were knocking on doors, gathering signatures and sharing screenshots of emails showing just how negligent the board had really been. I saw one where Marcia finally admitted that the park was not going to be returned to the HOA and all the events that were planned were cancelled. Even neighbors who had once been proud supporters of the HOA were now changing their tune. One lady who spent weeks giving me dirty looks actually spoke to me. She told me that at first she thought I was just trying to be difficult and stir up trouble. Now she sees how the HOA really is incompetent and all I did was bring that to light. It felt good, I won't lie. Eventually the vote came, the threshold to dissolve the HOA was high, but the anger was even higher. People showed up to that meeting with fines that the HOA had been handing out like candy for the last month, probably to try and regain some of the lost money. When the vote happened, 80% of the homeowners voted for the HOA to be totally dissolved. And just like that, the HOA was no more. It felt kinda weird, to be honest. Marcia tried to keep a good face by sending out emails thanking them for many years of unity. And yeah guys, just to quickly interject, if you want to support my channel, please don't forget to like the video, because if we could reach 1000 plus likes, that would help me tremendously in regards to fighting back against a stupid YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for supporting the good fight. Some of the board members even moved away because they were getting dirty looks and hate, the same looks they loved to give out in the past. As for me, well, I kept the park and I turned it into something better than it ever was under HOA rule. I did not commercialize it or turn it into a private venue, I just let it exist as it should, a quiet, well-maintained green space for people to enjoy, minus the power trips and micromanaging. I paid a local kid to help with mowing and trash pickup. I kept the gates locked at night to prevent vandalism, but during the day, if you were respectful, you were welcome to come in. Of course, some people were gonna get banned for behavior, but that's just part of life. Barbecue parties came back too, real ones, no permits, no enforcers, and no reservations. Just neighbors bringing burgers, folding chairs, and good vibes. People even started bringing dishes to share, organizing impromptu games of volleyball, and setting up lawn chairs for movie nights. None of it was really planned officially, but with modern-day communication and technology, a community can come together on its own to do things. Sometimes I think about how none of this would have happened if I had joined the HOA, or if Rick had not warned me against it, the place would have still been under Marcia's control instead of the community. I did not break any laws, I did not even raise my voice, I just played it smarter. I found the one weak spot they had ignored for years and I drove a legal bulldozer right through it. That's the beauty of not being a part of the HOA, you don't have to follow their rules, but they still underestimate you as if you do. They don't care if you're a member or not, they care about keeping their pockets full and being above others in a world where being a human being should be equal ground. Now there is no HOA, just neighbors, real neighbors. People who wave when you drive by, who help carry groceries, who don't send fines if your trash bins are visible for 10 extra minutes. I've thought about selling the land back to the county and hoping they keep it as a park. I worry about ruining the peace though, so for now I'm just gonna stay the quiet owner and watch people enjoy it. And yeah guys, if you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to subscribe and check out my playlist, and I will see you again tomorrow.